Let's look at this example. So each player on this basketball team is an excellent athlete, therefore the team as a whole is excellent. Now, what's wrong with this argument? If anybody plays sports, you probably know, or if you are interested in team sports specifically. Each player on this team is excellent, therefore the team is excellent. Is that how it works? No, this is not how it works. But what's the problem? So, excellent player, excellent team. Now, when we talk about excellent players, and then we talk about excellent teams, you can see there is a bit of equivocation here because the meaning is different, but in this case it's not just the equivocation which is the problem. It's the problem that we kind of transfer this quality of being an excellent player to an excellent team. And of course you can have a very excellent players, but team may not be very good. Why? Well, because it takes more than just individual quality of being a good athlete or player to work well as a team. The team has to have good coordination. Having too many stars, for example, could be bad for a team, because then each one of these great players, each one of these great stars wants to get all the attention and wants to do everything him or herself, whereas the team suffers. The team playing very often involves somebody to step back and let others handle the situation because they may be in a better position and so on. So that requires team work, and for that players have to work well together. And just because they are excellent athletes does not necessarily mean they are able to work well together. For this reason, that is a fallacy. And this is a type of a fallacy we'll cover today, just the two of them, fallacies of illicit transference. What happens with illicit transference? There's two of them, composition and division. In both cases, it is transference of some sort of an attribute, but either from parts to the whole, in which case we call it composition, or from whole to the parts, in which case it is division. Incorrect transfer of a particular attribute, from parts to the whole or from whole to the parts. Let's first look at composition. So composition is illegitimate transfer of an attribute from parts to the whole. So with the example of players on the team, that is a very good example. So parts would be players, excellent players, and we say, well, then the team is excellent. No, not necessarily. Might be, but that's not how you figure it out. You have to observe the team play in order to make determination about the team. That's not enough to know that the players are excellent. Several other good examples. Maria likes anchovies. She also likes chocolate ice cream. Therefore, it is certain that she would like a chocolate sundae topped with anchovies. Will she? Unlikely. Yeah. Each atom in this teacup is invisible, therefore the teacup is invisible. Oh, I didn't know that. Look, I guess doesn't work with this one. But why? Well, because illegitimate transfer. Sodium and chlorine, the atomic components of salt, are both deadly poisons. Therefore, salt is a deadly poison. Salt may not be very good for you, but deadly poison? I don't think so. I don't see anybody dropping dead after, salting their pistachios or something. So, no, not how it works. Although sodium and chloride are indeed deadly poisons, and they can immediately kill a human being. So, somehow, in a combination, it no longer works. Not every transfer obviously is illegitimate. Sometimes you can legitimately transfer an attribute or a quality from any part to the whole. This is a couple of examples. Every atom in this teacup has mass, therefore the teacup has mass. Yes, no problem here. Every component in this picket fence is white, therefore the whole fence is white. Again, there's no problem. And by the way, for the purposes of the exam, this is kind of important. Sometimes students tend to overthink it, make it overly complicated. Like, oh, what about the nails or some other parts of it? Does it say anything about the nails in the example? No, it just says every component is white. They have white nails, okay? Don't overthink it. And always ask yourself, is it even a fallacy? Because again, in some cases, students do tend to just see that some sort of quality or attribute has been transferred and immediately go, oh, it's composition then. Doesn't have to be. It may be no fallacy. Ask yourself if the transfer is illegitimate. Your common sense will tell you. How do you distinguish it from hasty generalization? Remember the hasty generalization? What do we do in hasty generalization? We take a sample, we generalize it to the whole. So often students are confused, like what's the difference? Parts to the whole, sample to the whole. Well, there is an important difference. First of all, you have to understand the difference between collective and distributive predication in order to see what the problem is. What is a distributive predication? Well, it is something which applies and can be assigned to each and every member of the class as well as to the class as a whole. Something like fleas are small. Suppose you want to know whether fleas are small. Can you use a statistical procedure? Yes. What do? Can you count all the fleas and find out whether they are small or big? No, you don't have time for that. But you can take a sample. If it's a random sample, you can generalize it to the whole, no problem. If it's not random, not representative, then you have hasty generalization. But the transfer of the quality of being small itself is perfectly legitimate. If every single flea is small, then you can say fleas are small. There is no problem here with the transfer. Now, what about collective predication? Collective predication is something which only applies to the class. Does not apply to individual. Or if it applies to individual, it cannot be transferred in the same way. But in this example, it doesn't even apply. Fleas are numerous. Can you take a sample of fleas to find out whether they're numerous? No. No sample will tell you this, right? It's not even an approach. So in cases when you cannot find out using statistical procedure, it cannot be a hasty generalization either. It will be a composition. This is what the difference is. An example with players on the team, well, you have excellent players on the team, but whether it's an excellent team, taking a sample of players not going to answer this question, is it? You have to observe the entire team playing. Same thing with fleas numerous. How do you know if they're numerous? Well, you have to observe all the fleas. There's many, many, many of them. Then you can say they're numerous. Sample, it doesn't even make any sense. What are you going to be looking for in each of these fleas? Whether this flea is numerous? That's nonsense, right? So this is what the difference is. So examine your argument. Ask yourself, can this answer even be given with the statistical procedure? If the answer is yes, then you can figure out whether or not it's been done properly, and based on that it will be either hasty generalization or perfectly good generalization. But if the answer is no, the statistical procedure here is not even going to help me, then of course it can only be composition and it cannot be hasty generalization. Or maybe there is no fallacy whatsoever. Here's another example. Less fuel is consumed by a car than by a fire truck. Therefore, less fuel is consumed in the United States by cars than by fire trucks. Is that true? Is that how it works? What do you guys think? No, that's not how it works. Because even though it is perfectly true that less fuel is consumed by one car than by one fire truck, but you cannot just take it and apply it to the entire class of cars and entire fire trucks. Why? Because there's a lot more cars in this country than fire trucks. Maybe fire truck consumes 10 times more fuel, but how many more times there are cars? Way more than 10 times. It's probably like 300 million cars or something, but fire trucks, I don't think there's even a million of them. There's probably less than a million. 10,000, 100,000, something like that, right? So it's like hundreds of times fewer trucks than cars. And so just even though one of them consumes 10 times more fuel, it's still, as a class, not going to consume as much fuel as cars. So that is an example of composition. Why is it not hasty generalization? Well, because you're not taking sample, and sample is not going to help you. Suppose you take 10 cars, 10 fire trucks, what is it going to tell you? Nothing. It's not going to solve this problem. The problem is not with sample, the problem is two classes as a whole being compared. And division is going the other way, just the exact opposite, right? Instead of going from parts to the whole, with division you're going from whole to the parts. Some of the examples are exactly the reverse of the previous. Salt is non-poisonous compound, therefore its component elements, sodium and chlorine, are non-poisonous. That's division. Note that it is exactly the reverse of the previous example where we say the sodium and chlorine are poisonous, therefore salt is poisonous. Here we are going from whole, from the salt, to component parts, therefore it's not composition, it's a division. Another example, airplane was made in Seattle, therefore every component part of this airplane was made in Seattle. Is that true? Not really. It was put together in Seattle, but the component parts of the airplanes, as almost anything today, is made somewhere in like China or some other Asian country. They bring it here over the ocean, they put it together, yes, and they call it American plane. But of course the truth of it is they only compose it together in this country, they do not produce them. The Royal Society is over 300 years old. Professor Thomson is a member of the Royal Society, therefore Professor Thomson is over 300 years old. I don't think so. What's the problem? Again, they improperly transfer this attribute from whole, from the society, to, in this case, one part of it, its member. And therefore it is division. Again, it's not always fallacious, not always illegitimate. So this teacup has mass, therefore atoms composing it have mass. Perfectly legitimate. This field of poppies is uniformly orange, therefore individual poppies are orange. Again, no problem here. Okay, let's do an exercise. See if you can figure out, for an extra credit, are there any fallacies, which ones, and if there's no fallacy, say no fallacy. Okay, so let's go over them. Every sentence in this paragraph is well written, therefore the paragraph is well written. Is that how it works? Did you do any writing? Can you actually imagine the paragraph which has well written sentences but it's a bad paragraph? Imagine if you take well written sentences from different texts and just randomly put them together. Those are gonna be well-written sentences, but the paragraph will not even make any sense, would it? So just because every sentence is well-written does not mean at all that paragraph is well-written. If you're doing any kind of writing, you should know that. So that obviously is a fallacy, and it is a fallacy of composition. Now number 6 is the fallacy of division, because in this case you are going from whole to the parts. Water will quench first, therefore hydrogen as oxygen will quench first by themselves. And the last one is no fallacy. What kind of argument is this? Do you remember? From definition. Butane is combustible, therefore it burns. This is what combustible means. So there's no fallacy here. It's neither division nor composition. It's not going from parts to the whole or from whole to the parts. It's just talking about butane, and it is by definition, if it is combustible, by definition it means that it burns. Okay, and by the way, one little change I have made, I hope you guys don't mind. We're not going to anymore have the correct answers there. We're just going to have the questions. I will still, of course, give you the correct answers, but they're not going to be on the slides. I just want to make it a little more difficult to, for the proliferation of the correct answers, because it seems like there is a possibility that some students unfairly getting answers from somewhere and then using that from other sections to get extra credit. And of course it's unfair to you guys, right? Great majority of you are honest. You're trying to honestly earn extra credit. Think how unfair it is if somebody got it from somebody else and then cheats basically and gets the points for something they don't even understand by simply firing out this, copy-pasting those extra credits. So for this reason, there's only so much I can do to avoid it, but like I said, I removed the correct answers from the slides, and they will also not appear in the video, but I'll just tell you, and even though it still is possible, I guess, but it's not going to be as easy as just copying them from the slides. Okay, so this is the second one. Same question. This one is more challenging, so think about it, and hopefully you can get the extra credit for this. Okay, well, I don't know if you guys are gonna give the correct answer here, so I may have to give it myself. No, that's incorrect. That is still incorrect. Any more options? No, that is incorrect. Okay, so let me give it to you then. There's one more person typing. Do you want to submit anything? Remember, there's no penalty, right? You got it wrong, well, so what? No big deal. But otherwise I have to give it to you, because we cannot spend the rest of the class just thinking on this for you. We'll do more in the end. Okay, so number 18. Is that a fallacy? Remember, that is what? A type of, in this case, well, sometimes students do think it's a false dichotomy, but it's not a false dichotomy. It is a disjunctive syllogism, right? You are given two choices, James Franco or Miley Cyrus, and then one of them is eliminated. Is this the only two choices? Well, in this case, think about it using your common sense. You are told either one of them is a popular singer. It doesn't even matter. Like, yeah, for example, you may say Britney Spears is also a popular singer. That doesn't affect this argument, does it? The argument doesn't tell you this is the only two popular singers in the world or something. It just tells you one of them is a popular singer. So in this case, there would not be false dichotomy. The question here is only whether or not it is valid disjunctive syllogism or not. And again, using your common sense, you can say that it is valid. It's perfectly valid, because either one of them is a popular singer. It's not James Franco, therefore it is Miley Cyrus. So it is no fallacy. And note that it also is sound, because even though it doesn't ask you this, but if you know anything, yes, Miley Cyrus is a popular singer, and James Franco is not. He's an actor, right? I don't even think he sings at all, but if he does, certainly he's not popular. Maybe he does it in a kitchen at home or something, but certainly not on big stage as Miley Cyrus does. So valid and sound. There's no fallacy whatsoever. Okay, let's look at the next one. An atomic bomb caused more damage than conventional bomb. Is that true? Yes, of course. Based on that, they are concluding that during World War II, more damage was caused by atomic bombs than by conventional bombs. Well, that requires a little bit of knowledge of history, but hopefully you guys know enough. How many atomic bombs were used during World War II? 2. How many conventional? Well, you probably don't know the exact number, and neither do I, but many, 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 many. Probably even like 1 million, or maybe even more than 1 million. So, while it is true that one atomic bomb does more damage than one conventional, but is it a legitimate transfer of the property to the class of atomic bombs against the class of conventional? No, it's not. And we know that even though these 2 atomic bombs were very devastating and they pretty much obliterated the cities of Hiroshima and Nagasaki in Japan, but how many cities were completely obliterated from conventional bombs? Hundreds in Germany, Russia, Poland, all over Europe. Even London got seriously damaged by conventional bombs because the Germans were flying over the English Channel and bombing London. So, no, that is not at all, not a good conclusion. And what is the problem here? The problem is the composition. You're transferring this quality inappropriately. So that is something we learned today. Now the last one is of course the most difficult, and you guys probably forgot all about it. So let's look at it. The author warns about numerous computational errors in his accounting text. Therefore, he must have written it very carelessly. Well, first of all, are they right with their conclusion? Must he done it carelessly? He warns about computational errors in accounting text. Chances are he is talking to you about possible errors you as an accountant can do while you are doing computations. So when they are saying it, when they are saying it as if he is the one who committed all these errors, what they are doing is amphiboly. They are misinterpreting what he said, probably deliberately, and it kind of makes it a little bit funny, but nonetheless they are misinterpreting his what he said. So based on that of course would be an amphiboly. Okay, fallacies in ordinary language. This is 3.5. There's no homework on it, by the way. Why? Because your entire life is homework on 3.5. You may say this is more or less something we have to apply in our daily life, and hopefully this is like the most important part that you should take away from this class, which is why it is called critical thinking and not logic, because it's not just logic, it's critical thinking in general. So, why do people commit fallacies? What are the fallacies? This is the question for 3.5. First of all, remember, if you try to identify fallacies in real life, they're not going to be as nicely and neatly cut as the ones we cover in this class, right? Sometimes it may not fit any one of these specific categories we talked about. Sometimes it may be a combination of several of them. There are different ways people can commit fallacies. How do you identify if there's a fallacy? First of all, be alert and ask yourself the following questions. If somebody is presenting you what appears to be an argument, be it in writing, in speaking, or in any other form, ask yourself what is the conclusion. This is something we did throughout, and this is the most important part. What is their conclusion? What is their main point? What are they trying to say? Then ask yourself, what reasons did they give you to support this conclusion? Are these reasons relevant? Sometimes they may again seem psychologically relevant, but they not logically relevant. A classic example would be all these ad hominem fallacies. Yes, it may seem psychologically relevant that the guy who's making an argument is moral reprobate or whatever, but he may still have a good argument. And you should evaluate the argument and not be swayed by the fact that this person is somebody you don't like or somebody who did something which is not nice or whatever other reasons. Then ask yourself whether they really support the conclusion. And this is where a whole host of other fallacies can kick in, when it may seem like they do, but if you actually figure it out for yourself and use your common sense and your knowledge gained in this class, they actually do not support it. Why do fallacies even occur? This is a big question, and this is important. What happens? Well, sometimes they are there intentionally. When are they committed intentionally? Well, one example you can think of is, say, politicians. Many of them are smart people. They know what fallacies are. They took logic in whatever school they attended. But they intentionally do this for rhetorical purposes. They want you to accept their conclusions, even though they may not have a good argument to support it. Very often they don't want to tell you the truth. Maybe the real reason they support a particular issue is because of lobbying or something. Somebody is supporting their campaign. But they can't tell you this, can they? Instead, they want you to accept this weak argument, even though they have nothing better than fallacies. And they deliberately will use fallacies to convince you. That's one possibility. However, more often than not, for most of us, this is not intentional. This is just a careless mental posture. So we do not take necessary precaution against it. We have a particular emotional disposition for a particular issue, which is understandable. We're all humans. And because of that, we just kind of throw it all in there. And in the heat of a debate or whatever, we can just use the fallacy without thinking too much about it. The third very important reason, which is kind of behind the second one too, is the influence of a worldview. And this is something we should talk about in a little bit more detail. So what is a worldview? Each one of us has a worldview, and it's a cognitive network of beliefs, attitudes, habits, memories, values which we have. All these elements which essentially make the world meaningful to us. We all have them. It's inevitable, and we should. There's nothing wrong with having them. So how does it work specifically? Where does the worldview come from? Usually we acquire it in our infancy. Because let's face it, we are born without a worldview. We are born as more or less a blank sheet of paper, right? We don't have any language. We don't have any values. We don't know who we are. We are born, and then we are told something like, oh, you are male. You are white. You are Russian, in my case, or American. This is what we are told as soon as we learn the language. And then we learn all sorts of other things about the world and about ourselves from other people, and for at least several years we take them without questioning because we are children, right? When you're 5, 6, 7 years old, how much do you question? Even if you question something, that's probably for wrong reasons. And then we are formed as a human beings, and we acquire a particular culture from the culture surrounding us, a particular language, which of course is the language we speak. We are getting to know a particular gender we supposed to have, certain religion, if there is a religion in our household typically, or a country in some cases, because for some countries there's not much of a difference in that sense. Politics and social and economic status, which again are given to us by our parents more often than not. I mean, where else would you get your social and economic status? If you're born into a poor family, you probably will be growing up poor, wouldn't you? And if you're born into the rich family, you will be growing up rich, and so on. So as we grow older, it continues. Education, experience, everything which happens throughout our lives necessarily contributes to this. So we have this determined worldview as a result of all that. And then it influences how we think about the world around us. A good example about the influence of the worldview in the book is a worldview of a lawyer. Court trial, a lawyer will tell you, is like a professional football game. In a professional football game, the most important thing is winning. Similarly, in a trial, the most important thing is winning. Why would they say that? Well, what is their job? Right? Their job is to win. This is what they're there for. A defense lawyer, for example, would see it as a loss if his client is found guilty. And on the other hand, if it's a prosecution, lawyer for the prosecution, he would see it as a failure if he did not successfully put somebody in jail or got them convicted. Now, as a society, do we agree with that? Is this how we should look at it? Court trial is like a football game? Let the best guy win? Do we care about the most professional side who did the best job winning? What do you guys think? No. Who do we want to win? The right side, the one on whose side the justice is supposed to be. We want the guilty person to go to jail, and we want the innocent person to be acquitted, right? That's what we want. Otherwise, the whole thing is a sham. A great example, which many of you probably weren't even born yet, but I actually remember it myself. I watched it on TV live. O.J. Simpson trial. There is a great example where he had a great team. He paid them millions of dollars, and they did the best job they could. Some even would say they overstepped some lines there. Oh, so you remember that. Yeah, very good job. They got him off. They got him off, even though there's pretty much no doubt today that he is guilty. In fact, he pretty much admitted it. He wrote a book saying, if I did it, that's how I did it. And he admitted that in the interview, qualifying it, saying, oh, it's a hypothetical. It's a hypothetical. I'm just saying that if I did that, this is how it happened. And then he point blank just said how it happened. Why did he put this hypothetical? Because he still doesn't want them to go after him. Because even though it's double jeopardy, but if he admits, if he says, yes, I did it, then they actually can. But he said, no, it's all hypothetical. I didn't do it, but suppose I did. This is how I did it. So we have pretty much no doubt now that he did it. But he got off. Is that fair? Is that justice? Obviously not. Yeah, civil court. You know why? Because in civil court, first of all, he was forced to testify. You cannot claim the Fifth Amendment in civil court. You have to testify. And second of all, because in civil court, it's not beyond reasonable doubt. In civil court, it's preponderance of evidence. So if he is more likely to be guilty than not, then they convict him. But yes, and that's another glaring example, which seems like completely insane. Like, so in one court he's found guilty, in another court he's found not guilty. So it's like, so which one is it? But the point though is, this is injustice. This is not how we should look at it. How should we look at it? This is a weak analogy from our point of view. Weak analogy. It's not a professional's football game. It's not a game. There are real lives at stake here. Some people have been murdered in this particular case. Somebody did commit the crime, and we want the guilty person to go to jail. We don't care which team is the best. We care who has the truth on their side. That's what we care about. So a lawyer looking at it like this is influenced by their worldview, but this is not how it should be looked at. How do you avoid the worldview fallacies? Well, this is again what critical thinking is for, and hopefully this is so much as you will get from this class. Acknowledge, first of all, the fact that you have a worldview, and then try to criticize it. Try to play devil's advocate. Try to question things which you take for granted. Because more often than not, let's face it, we all are already have these roles. For example, I am already male. I am already white. I am already Russian. So it's kind of difficult for us to look at it from point of view of somebody else, such as a woman or a person of color, right? But we have to. There is a great philosopher. If you take Philosophy 101, we may talk a little bit more about this. John Rawls. John Rawls is considered one of the towering figures of modern liberal thought. So he suggested the following thought experiment. Philosophers actually love thought experiments, so he suggested each one of us to do this. He said, suppose you are not born yet. It's called veil of ignorance. Suppose you are not born yet, and you do not know who you will be born. You may be white or you may be black. You may be rich or you may be poor. You may be man or you may be woman. You don't know. And try to imagine, how would you set up the world that you will be born into? So this is how we should think about how the world should be. Because think about it, if you're not born yet, would you want to be born into the world where you have racism? But what if you will be born black? Would you want to be born into the world with male dominance? But what if you will be born woman? Would you want to be born into the world where rich people have everything and poor people have nothing? But what if you will be born poor? Think about it. We don't choose any of this, do we? We are who we are, but so are other people. So in order for this world to be fair, we really do have to make sure that it is fair to everybody. This is the most important thing. And it's difficult again because, yes, like I said, each one of us is already somebody. And it's so easy for somebody who is already a male to say, I don't see any problem with male dominance. Why should I see any problem with that? I am male. It works so well for me. What's the problem? Well, part of the problem now, even for males, is that just means that people who otherwise are well qualified may not get a particular job just based on the fact that they are women, right? And that would not be good for a society, because in some cases we may have a, for example, well-qualified woman who would be a great president, but if we're going to not going to allow her to become president just based on the fact that she is a woman, that will make our country weaker, wouldn't it? Shouldn't we get the best for the job? And if we're going to vote for somebody just because he's a male, even though he may be blatantly unqualified to lead this country, that again would be a grave injustice, and it will do damage to this country. So yes, it does affect all of us. And the same thing with racism. It creates all these tensions, right? And then we get riots, and then we get damage and so on. But wouldn't it be better if there were no racism, and so people would not be forced to rebel against it? It's in everybody's interests. It's an interest of white people just as much as it is in the interest of black people. The less tension there is between people, the better it is for everybody. So this is why it is so important for us. Yeah, I wish. Okay, it's not easy. It's difficult. It's difficult for all of us. And I don't even want to take partisan lines here also because, remember, it doesn't matter if you're a Democrat or a Republican. You have to try to look at the other side and they understand their point of view too. And this is just as important because very often we tend to overlook what the other side is saying just because of this partisan division. This partisan division is really, really bad, and it does a lot of damage. Of course, you entitled to your own view, but listen to the others too. And this is very important. This is essence of the critical approach, is to be able to criticize your own point of view as much as the point of view of the other people. Ask yourself, why do I have this view? Do I think this view is correct? What is the other side saying? If after that you will conclude that your point of view is still correct, great. But always be open to other points of view. Always listen to other people and try not to preform any conclusions, because this tribe mentality is dangerous too, and this is why it's one of the fallacies, this appeal to the people, direct variety, because we don't want any tribe mentality. Sometimes even your side may be wrong on some particular issue, and you should again be able to acknowledge it and criticize it. One of the worst things which we see happening in this country is this partisan divide, when people are just disagreeing with the other side without even listening. They don't even want to listen. Just look at these debates. It's a shame, like the way it happened last time. Nobody listens to anybody. This is horrible. You should listen to the other side. You should let them talk, and you should present good, well-structured arguments why you think you are right. Trying to just shout over them and shut them up, this is horrible. This is what can lead to civil war, because when you go down that path, what's next? Just a bullet, just taking a gun and killing the other side literally, and that is not good. That's not going to be good for anybody. So you should always be open-minded and decide every issue based on the evidence, based on the facts, and based on your best judgment. Acknowledge the fact that you have a point of view, criticize even your own point of view, and be vigilant about all these fallacies. Be vigilant about possibility that even you will commit them if you feel too emotionally predisposed. It is hard, but it is necessary, because that's the only way for all of us to live together. There are billions of us on this planet. We all have different backgrounds, we all have different cultures, but we have to coexist, right? We have to understand each other, to be respectful of each other, and that way we will all benefit. Okay, and so now we will do a little summary of the chapter 3. Like I promised you guys, we will go over all the fallacies rather quickly, but I will upload the whole thing, right? So you can rewatch that video if you want to. I'll put it on YouTube as usual as well, and you also will be able to access the PowerPoint with this particular summary. So we started with the fallacies, and we said that a fallacy is a defect in an argument that arises from a mistake in reasoning or a creation of an illusion that makes a bad argument appear good. There are two kinds of fallacies, remember, formal and informal. Formal fallacies can be detected by analyzing the form of an argument. And here we're talking about deductive arguments, because they are the only ones where you can find a fallacy when you analyze the form. Informal fallacies detectable only analyzing the content, because the form of an argument, such as argument from analogy, by itself is not fallacious. What is fallacious is the content of that argument. What are you comparing with what? Now, fallacies of relevance. There's quite a few of them. I put them all in one slide to make it easier for you guys. It's a little crowded here, but nonetheless. So, what were fallacies of relevance? This is when premises are not relevant to the conclusion. First one is appeal to force. This is very simple. This is when somebody threatens you and says if you don't accept the conclusion, something bad will happen to you. Appeal to the pity. This is when somebody wants you to accept the conclusion because they invoke in pity. They're saying if you don't accept it, but I'm such a poor, such and such, and such a bad things will happen if you don't accept my conclusion. Appeal to the people. You don't have to remember the specifics on the exam. It will just say appeal to the people. That will be just one Well, like I said, yeah, sure. So that will be just one option, appeal to the people. There is not going to be any more distinction. But remember that appeal to the people could be of all these varieties, direct and indirect, whereas direct is addressing the whole group of people as a group, or indirect could have these varieties, appeal to fear, fear mongering, something like, oh, those immigrants, they come here and then rape us and so on, so they're bad. Bandwagon argument, everybody's doing it, you should do it too. Appeal to vanity, don't you want to be like Daniel Craig? If you do, then you will buy this watch. Appeal to snobbery, don't you want to be one of the select few people? Very, very select group of people, then you will buy our product. Appeal to tradition, well, that's a tradition, the way we're doing it, therefore we should be doing it this way in the future. Argument against the person. Now here you do have to remember the three varieties of it. Ad hominem abusive, ad hominem circumstantial, and tu quoque. And the difference is, ad hominem abusive, he is saying don't listen to his or her argument because it's such a bad person who is making it. Circumstantial, don't listen to his or her argument because they have a personal circumstance in their life which will make them biased. They will benefit somehow from the outcome, such as she's a waitress, she's on minimum wage, and she's arguing for minimum wage. She'll benefit from that. And finally, tu quoque. Tu quoque is when you're saying somebody is hypocritical. They are, for example, saying you should not smoke, but they smoke themselves. They're saying you should not lie, but they lie themselves. And again, that is a fallacy because, yeah, maybe they do and they regret it or not. Their argument should still be evaluated based on the merit of the argument and not the person who says that. An accident. General rule misapplied. Typically, but not always, but typically it would be something like Constitution. First Amendment guarantees everybody right of speech. Therefore, these radicals have right to proliferate radical ideas. Straw man. This is when the argument has been distorted. He is advocating welfare for the poor, therefore he is for socialism, but socialism is bad. That's a classic example of a straw man. Missing the point. The argument may not be bad, but the conclusion does not follow. A different conclusion should follow from that argument rather than the one drawn. Red herring. This is when switch of the subject takes place. The arguer had something else in mind, but the person who is making an argument is rapidly switches the topic from one thing to the other. Well, we'll do a few more examples, so you hopefully will see it better. Fallacies of weak induction. Fewer of them. This is when premises may be relevant to the conclusion, but insufficient support for the conclusion being given. Unqualified authority. This is when you are using somebody as an authority, but he or she is not really a good authority on the subject. Appeal to ignorance. This is when you're saying, well, nobody proven it right, therefore it's wrong, or nobody proven it wrong, therefore it's right. Hasty generalization. Taking a sample, trying to generalize it to the whole, but the sample is taken improperly. Either it is not random or it is not representative. False cause. Again, just false cause is all you need, but there are several varieties. Remember, every time that something is not really the cause of another thing, but we think it is, such as post hoc ergo propter hoc, non causa pro causa, simplified cause, or the gambler's fallacy. All of this would be examples of false cause. Slippery slope. When we are saying, well, if we allow for this to happen, then that might happen, and that might happen, and that might happen, and the whole thing will collapse. And finally, weak analogy. That's the one where we compare into things, make an analogy, but this is not a good analogy. Fallacies of presumption. We're presuming what we have to prove. Begging the question is a classic example. There are three varieties. You don't have to remember each one, but generally they always kind of circular. Either some sort of key premise has been left out, or you are just restating the conclusion, the premise in the conclusion, or it's a longer circle, but nonetheless you are kind of restating the same thing in the end. Complex question, that's a loaded question. That's when you have multiple questions in one. False dichotomy, when you are given the choice of two, but there really are more than two choices. And you can see that there are more than two choices than what you are being given. And suppressed evidence, this is when there is something important to the argument, and if that important thing is mentioned, then the conclusion will not follow, but somebody is deliberately not mentioning it in order for you to accept the conclusion. Fallacies of ambiguity, there's just two of them, equivocation and amphiboly. This is always based on ambiguity, so there's more than one meaning. And in case of equivocation, this is a word or a phrase used in two meanings. And in case of amphiboly, this is whole statement, and it is somebody else's words. And when it is somebody else's words being misinterpreted, this is amphiboly. And the last two we covered today, composition and division. So composition, again, an illegal transfer or illegitimate transfer of attribute from parts to the whole, and division from whole to the parts. Okay, now we can do exercises, and hopefully you guys are well prepared, and in the remaining 15 minutes we'll do as many of them as we can, so start working on it. This narrows it down a little bit. This is 3.2, 3.3, so this is the stuff which was in the last homework. If there are fallacies, they'd be one of those ones, and if there is no fallacy, say no fallacy. Again, this is for extra credit, so think about it. I'll be right back. I'll give you a few minutes. This is kind of a difficult question because, well, I don't know if you noticed, guys, but the higher numbers, this is because this is from the book, they usually tend to like increase in difficulty, 23, 24, and 30. That is from one of the sections. They usually are more difficult than the first ones there. So that actually is kind of a difficult extra credit. But okay, so in this case, Emil did get it right. Emil, good job. So it is tu quoque, that is true. Why is it tu quoque? Well, it's ridiculous to hear that man from Peru complaining about America's poverty. Peru has twice as much poverty as America. Again, it is ad hominem, but if you think about it, and Sandy, you did get it right. Sometimes students confuse here between circumstantial and tu quoque, but what they are saying is not that he's biased because he's from Peru. What they are saying is exactly that he is hypocritical. He is from a poor country, so why is he criticizing poverty? And of course it is a fallacy. So that was correct. Yeah, see, that is a red herring. Why is it red herring? Folks who argue in favor of amnesty for undocumented immigrants are dead wrong. Homeland security is of vital importance. Wait a minute, how is it about homeland security? It may seem like it's related, but isn't it a different topic? I mean, they are already in this country, aren't they? They already are here. If there's any homeland security concern, like if they are terrorists, well, too late. Too late. If they want to blow something up, they will. So that is not an issue. You may say that, okay, since they came here illegally, they have to be removed, and that can be argued for or against. But Homeland Security, the ship has sailed. It's too late for Homeland Security. At this point, that would be red herring, you see, because they are switching the issue. Begging the question is if they are restating the same thing in the conclusion or skipping something, but this is not the case. Here they actually are switching the subject, and when you switch the subject, that is a red herring. And the last one is, of course, very clear slippery slope. You can see it hopefully right away because, I mean, that's a classic example. Yeah, you both got it right. I don't know how you can get it wrong. This is one of the easiest questions. So yeah, if we allow Spanish, we'll have allow Greek and Russian and this and that, and then what? Obviously that is a fallacy. Okay, let's do another one. Let's see how well you'll do this. This is on the entire chapter 3. So could be any of the fallacies we covered, including the ones from today. Or maybe no fallacy. Note that we're not evaluating the argument of the state representative. We are evaluating an argument which is presented to us. So we're not starting from the reason Newton school massacre occurred is because of this. We are looking at the whole thing. Okay, Elizabeth got it. Yes, unqualified authority. Because whoever is saying that is basing his argument on the words of state representative. But why is state representative an authority on the subject? Who should we listen to on that subject? Well, school teachers would be a good start. Ask school teachers if they think that will help. Perhaps some sort of experts in security, maybe police, they could contribute. What do they think will help? State representative is not exactly the person who we should listen to on that issue. I'm sure state representatives have their own opinion, but hopefully they are making up their opinion based on good evidence, and we don't really see that happening very often. So that is appeal to unqualified authority. The next one is, of course, appeal to the people. You don't have to specify more precisely. If you think about it, it's probably appeal to snobbery. Yes, because what they're saying is that you should eat Wheaties. Why? Because you want to be a champion, don't you? And the last one is hasty generalization. They are taking a sample of black people and they generalizing to all black people, even though obviously this is not a random sample. They are self-selected. 3 of the rich black people pointed at them. Does it prove anything? No, of course not. If you want to know whether black people are wealthy, well, take a random sample of at least several of them. If all of them happen to be wealthy, then you have a case. Otherwise, of course, it's a hasty generalization. Okay, Elizabeth, good job. We don't have any more time. I don't know, maybe I'll do it in the next section if I have time and then put a video, or otherwise maybe we'll never make it there, but with all the time we have for today. We have to conclude, guys. So thank